Another week, another issue straining South Korea's relationship with China. This time, Seoul was left perplexed and upset by the claim that imported South Korean clothes could be responsible for new COVID-19 outbreaks in China, where this past Monday, state media reported 8 local COVID cases in the Beijing area linked to a store selling South Korean imported clothes, matching reports of infections in several other regions. In one case this month, reported by Chinese medical newspaper Jiankang Shibao, the virus was detected on 4 hoodies, which happened to be from South Korea originally, but which had been bought by someone in China who was infected. Such suspicions, whether justified or not, are directly affecting not only diplomatic ties, but also China's fashion imports from South Korea are falling, again, according to Chinese state media. So let's just offer a little fact check here by asking, how likely is it that South Korean clothing could have been the source of an outbreak? Let's start by looking at research on how long this coronavirus can survive on clothing. According to a paper published by the medical journal The Lancet in April 2020, this coronavirus can survive less than 2 days on cloth at room temperature, or 22 Celsius to be precise. In fact, the paper found that the virus lasts less time on cloth than on other objects, particularly those with smooth surfaces like banknotes or things made of glass, stainless steel and plastic. A separate study in the Journal of Virology did find the virus could survive at 20 Celsius on cotton fabric for 7 days if the effects of UV rays were blocked. Raise that temperature to 40 Celsius and it doesn't last 24 hours on cotton fabric, regardless of how dark it is. There may be a further lesson here about using artificial light to kill the virus, but let's examine what the experts are saying about the connection between surfaces and infection. According to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, there's a less than 1 in 10,000 chance of infection by contact with the surface of an object contaminated with the COVID-19 virus. Based on the data and studies through this pandemic, transmission through contact with objects is not generally the way this virus spreads between people. Rather, the principal mode is through exposure to respiratory droplets. And experts here in South Korea have also weighed in. Professor Kim Woo-ju of the Department of Infectious Diseases at Korea University Guro Hospital says, after reviewing the research results, the coronavirus can survive up to 2 days on textiles. Even if the virus was detected via PCR testing, it is highly likely that it is a dead virus. Professor Om Jung-sik, also an infectious disease expert at Gachon University Gil Hospital, adds, I think it is almost impossible to get infected with COVID-19 through clothing. Even if there is a very low risk, isn't it more likely that China's going through what much of the world has had to accept? The spread of highly infectious new variants that certainly don't need clothes to jump from person to person. Just look at Shanghai, with tens of millions of residents under lockdown and where official new cases have surpassed the Wuhan peak at the start of the pandemic. COVID-19 has surged across China in recent weeks. This is also a country where 158 million people reportedly bought overseas products in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. And yet, state media and some officials have now raised concerns about a handful of cases rather unrealistically linked to clothes from South Korea, hurting manufacturers here as well as bilateral ties, but presumably making very little difference to China's infections.